Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Menachot daf Gimel. So we began yesterday Masechet Menachot as we change from our discussion of animal sacrifices to flower-based sacrifices. And so let me share my screen and we'll get started. Hold on just a second. Here we go. So in the opening Mishnah, which parallels the opening Mishnah in Zvachim, we saw that when one brings a mincha, generally, even if you bring it for not its own sake, it will remain a kosher offering. Just like when you bring most Zvachim, most animal sacrifices, even if you bring them not for their own sake, it will remain kosher. Just as the flashback, we saw that that at least according to the Tanakhama main opinion in Zvachim, it was only the Chatas and the Pesach that didn't work. Here, however, it's the mincha for a sinner or a mincha for a sota that doesn't work if not brought for its own sake. We have not explained why. I think that's going to be, God willing, tomorrow's daf. In the Gemara, we quoted Rabbi Shimon in two different brisas. In one brisa, it matched our Mishnah, so that's totally fine. He's just saying exactly what our Mishnah said, so he could be the author of our Mishnah. In the second, and that's actually the one we quoted first, Rabbi Shimon said that the mincha not for its own sake was not only kosher, but it even counted for its owners to fulfill the owner's obligation. And again, in our Mishnah, I omitted this fact that not only that it's kosher, but like the Zvachim, it's kosher, but it does not fulfill the owner's obligation. And so Rabbi Shimon was saying remarkably that not only was a mincha not offered for its own sake kosher, meaning it was a good sacrifice, and therefore the Kohanim could eat the leftover parts of the mincha. If it was a mincha to which that they could eat the remainder, but it was. But it was not a kosher offering to fulfill the owner's obligation. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says not only is it kosher so that the sacrifice gets burned and the people can eat it, but it actually fulfills the owner's obligation. And it was because the action done demonstrates the type of offering, such as a mincha for a pan brought with the intention of a griddle. So mincha will in the end be put in a pan, and so the action proves what it is. So now we have this machlokes between, or potential machlokes between our Mishnah and another brisa, and Rabbi Shimon's statement in this most recent brisa that I just cited or just quoted. So we saw that there will be three different answers, and although we didn't offer those answers in context, we know that there are three answers because what we said in connection with the debate between Rabbi Shimon and our Mishnah is that only according to Rav Ashi could Rabbi Shimon be the author of our Mishnah. So according to Rabbah, what's the answer? According to Rabbah, the answer of how we understand the two brisas that both quote Rabbi Shimon. So in the brisa that matched our Mishnah, we're dealing with a change in intent regarding the identity of the owner. But when Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher and counts, it's talking about where the change is in its holiness, i.e., instead of focusing on a mincha for this, you focus on a mincha for that. Or instead of focusing on a mincha, you focus on a shlamim, etc. Because it's obvious that it's a mincha, it's going to count, even though the basic point, according to this understanding, according to Rabbah, is that we focus on your actions. Your actions essentially speak louder than the words of your intention and can override and demonstrate that what you said was just an accident and not what you truly intend, and therefore it will all be okay. Rava, on the other hand, says that no, it's not. Making a big mistake doesn't make things better, but rather, if in the Baraisa that matched our Mishnah, we're dealing with a change of intent from one mincha to another mincha, whereas Rabbi Shimon says no, and so as a result, I'm sorry, in the one that matched our Mishnah, where it's not going to be kosher, we're changing from a mincha to an animal sacrifice. And so that's why it counts, but it doesn't actually work for the particular owner. But when Rabbi Shimon says that it is kosher and it counts, it's talking about where the change is from one type of mincha to another type of mincha. And again, that's not consistent with our Mishnah, but we're not fully consistent with our Mishnah, but it is consistent with the basic idea that there are certain circumstances that it works and certain circumstances that it doesn't. And finally, Rav Ashi's answer was that the brisa that matched our Mishnah were dealing with a change in intent from mincha A to mincha B. But when Rabbi Shimon says that it's kosher and it counts, it's talking about where the change is to just think or say B, meaning that instead of saying that this is you're intending this to be a mincha for a griddle, but instead you say, I'm thinking about a pan. And so as a result, you don't actually think that it's a mincha for a pan, but you just think pan, meaning you think that you're going to put it in a pan, but then you realize, no, it's for a griddle. It's a mincha for a griddle. And so as a result, you put it in the griddle and it'll be not only kosher, meaning not only one that the Kohanim can eat and gets burned on the altar, but it will actually satisfy the owner's obligation. So where are we? So those are the three answers that we are going to see to this question. We've already seen Rabba's answer that was provided at the end of the day yesterday, and we've seen two challenges so far to Rabbah, and we've rejected both those challenges. The challenges are based on the following concept. Again, Rabbah says that if you make such a mistake that it can't possibly be true, that it's okay. And in that situation, we'll just focus on your actions. So if your actions can only be associated with one korban, and you then think and intend to do a different korban, we're going to ignore your thinking and intention because your actions speak louder than words, as we often say. And so right now we've rejected the first two efforts, but now we're on the top of Gimel Amud Aleph, beginning of the third line, and we say Chatas Ha'of. Shehiz
If a person has the pan, right? And we had
what?
this it's a discussion yesterday, and it was that if he has a pan versus a marcheshet, whatever it may be, vice
The
versa,
marcheshet is the pan,
right? And
and
then you
the
got
machavas is the griddle. And
machvat.
basically, the difference
Machvat
is that
is like a frying pan, machvat.
yes, exactly, but it's got
So,
a lower
right.
rim to it. So
Yeah,
the
it's
point is, so
so
the
if it
question
when
is,
but the question is if he's putting it in one versus the other, we don't necessarily know what he's thinking
no,
unless
he tells
he's
us what he's thinking. He tells us what he's thinking. The point is when we say shalom lishma, it means that he tells us, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that you're about to put it in the griddle. I thought you were going to put it on in a pan." And so now what do we do? So the answer is that first of all, for sure, everybody agrees you put it in what was supposed to be in, meaning if I separated it for a griddle, then it's supposed to go in the griddle. If I separate it for a pan, it's supposed to go in the pan, irrespective of what the Kohen who's doing the kamitza thinks. So he may be thinking the wrong thing, but we're going to put it in the right one. And so that is the key point. And again, we know what he's thinking because he tells us what he's thinking, or somebody hears him. According to Rashi, when we're talking about intention, Rashi says that the intention is always a verbal intention. And so as a result, somebody could potentially have heard him say what he wanted to put it in, and then that person reports, "Hey, that guy said a griddle, and now you're putting it in a pan. So what's the deal?" Okay, so that's the kind of situation that we're
but if he
talking
put it in the right object, the right utensil in the end, which the right pan, then even though he may have thought or changed his thought in midstream, wouldn't it be accepted?
It is kosher. Again, depends according to whom. According to our Mishnah, it's kosher, but it doesn't fulfill the owner's obligation. So the owner would have to bring a new one if he swore to bring it. But according to Rabbi Shimon, not only does it fulfill not only is it kosher, but it would fulfill the person's obligation.
Yeah.
That's the machlokus.
Right.
That's the machlokus. So exactly that. So again, right now we're going according to Rabbah, and Rabbah would certainly say that in that circumstance it would be kosher and fulfill the obligation according to Rebbe Shimon. And so let's take a look at the next question. Chat haza'of. We have a bird sin offering. Shehita is dama lamata l'shem olas ha'of. Now, what did you do with it? Now remember, we go back to our Masechet Zvachim education, and we know that a chatas, the blood of the chatas bird, gets put below the line, below the midline of the altar, and it does not get sprinkled, but I'm sorry. What did I? Let's back up and say it again. The bird chatas the gets put below the line and gets sprinkled, whereas a bird ola gets put above the line and gets squeezed out of the bird. Those are the two different aspects to it. So now we have this chatas ha'of, a bird chatas, and you put the blood, you sprinkle the blood below the line like you're supposed to. But instead of intending for a bird chatas, you intended for a bird ola. Now, the only animal for which you are going to sprinkle blood below the line for it is a bird chatas. That's the only animal where you have sprinkling, where you're throwing the blood out of the bird, essentially. You know, you're holding the bird and you shake the bird essentially and get the blood out of the bird. So tiratzeh, it should be kosher because according to Rabbah's explanation, which is that if the falsehood of your thinking is so ridiculous, is so inappropriate, is so inconsistent with your action that the only action could be the kosher one, well, then it should work. And so here, this bar chata should work. Everything you did about it, the fact that you sprinkled it below the line, that shows that it's a bird chatas. It's the only thing it could be. Olas ha'ovhi, because if it was a bird ola, lamala have avidlay. La, you would have done the sprinkling. You would have done the blood application. It wouldn't even be one. It wouldn't be a sprinkling. It would be a squeezing. Umitzi hava avidlay. You would have done above the line, and it would have been done through squeezing. So hachinami, you know what? You are absolutely right. That in fact, that Rabbi Shimon would say that bird chatas is kosher. And what about, one second though, didn't he say that it's only true for menachos and not for zvachim? No, lefisha ein hamenachos domos l'zvachim kamar. What about the fact that he said that the menachos are not like zvachim? Yeah, l'zvachim. He was referring to big animal sacrifices, the low ovos, and not bird sacrifices. So there is an example where you can have a bird sacrifice that is offered and your actions, your non-kosher intentions can be totally rejected and totally canceled by your actions. And so that's the situation where we would say, okay, so now we got to find now. So that as a result,
So what was his intent here?
His intent was for an ola, but in fact, it was actually, again, the Kohen intends an ola. The person who brought it as a chatas. And so the question, but the intention was done during the Malika. And so as a result, now that it's time to do the action that's being done for it is the same action that you do for a bird chatas. And so as a result, according to Rabbah's explanation of Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon would say that because the action completely is consistent with only a bird chatas, and it has to be a bird chatas, your actual thoughts don't matter, and it is going to be considered a kosher sacrifice that will satisfy the obligations of the offerer, of the person.
Wait a second, but he brought it as a chatat, and the Kohen changed had a different intention. What right does the Kohen have to change the intent of the owner of the bird? And
All right, so this is
therefore,
a
what?
discussion that we had way back in Zvachim. He has no right to do it. You're 100% right that he has no right to do it, but he did it. The question is as a result of that false intention, of that incorrect intention, does the korban become completely unusable? Meaning, is it like a big animal chatas or a Pesach on Pesach where the korban is completely not kosher and needs to be burned outside the temple? Or do we say, no, it stays to be a good korban, but it doesn't count towards the owner's obligation? Or is it not only a good korban, but it counts towards the owner's obligation? Those are three different possible outcomes with respect to the bad intent. According to the Chachamim, it's the middle category. It's the wrong intention, but it's still a good korban, and well, I mean, actually, according to what we saw back in Zachim, this is a chatas, and so as a result, the chatas would not be valid, and according to the Chachamim. But according to Rabbi Shimon, who says ignore the person's thinking, focus solely on the actions, and if the actions are totally inconsistent with the thinking, ignore the thinking. Well, then this is a kosher chatas ha'of.
But
And
the
so
way I
as
understood you presented this fellow wanted to bring it as an Ola, and the
No,
Kohen.
no, no. I most definitely did not say that.
That's
He
what I
wanted
thought
to
I just
bring it
said.
as a chatas. The
Oh,
Kohen
okay.
thought Ola. The
Oh, okay.
Kohen thought Ola, and
Then
the
I misheard
Kohen,
that.
and then
That's
the
what.
and then the sprinkling that was done in the manner of a chatas. And so, as a
Okay.
result, that's the
Oh,
situation that we're talking about. The situation that you just mentioned are the questions that we had yesterday.
right. I understood.
Okay. So now we go to Zvachim. So Kadshe Kadshim Sheshchatam B'Tzafon L'Shem Kadshim Kalam. So now again, we're still trying to challenge Rabbah. Well, the first two challenges didn't work because we said that they weren't sufficiently false. This challenge was sufficiently false, and he says, yeah, actually, Rabbi Shimon would agree in that case that the sacrifice would be a good sacrifice. So now we go to the large animals, where it's clear that according to Rabbi Shimon, large animals don't have any kind of situation, at least it seems like, don't have any kind of situation where you could be so false as to actually end up being kosher. And so now we're going to try and challenge that. What about a kachim kachim? If you have a holy of holy sacrifice, shishchatan b'tzafon, you slaughter in the north, but you shalishem kachim kalim, but you're thinking one of the less holy sacrifices. Now the less holy sacrifices are slaughtered generally in the south. Liratzu, it should be okay. Why? Because because of course the north is always going to be crowded with the holy of holy sacrifices. So as a result, must be that this is a holy of holy sacrifices. If you could have done it in the south, if it was a kachim kalim, you would have done it in the south. So no, not necessarily. As we've seen before, and as we say every day, when we say that kachim kalim are slaughtered in the south, it doesn't mean that they have to be slaughtered in the south. It means that they can even be slaughtered in the south. And so, b'darom v'lo b'tzavon mi'amar. Did anybody ever say that it had to be the south and not the north? And of course not. Titanan shchita san b'kol makom ba'azara, as we say every day in the fifth parak of Zvachim, and as we say in Korbanot, so that we say that this slaughtering of a Kachim Kalim can be done anywhere in the entire courtyard. And so as a result, that question is rejected. Question number 5. Kachim Kalim Shishchatam B'darom L'Shem Kachim Kachim. Oh, what about in the opposite order? What about if you slaughter kachim kalim and you slaughter them in the south, and you kachim kalim, right? You slaughter them in the south, which is where you're supposed to slaughter them, but you slaughter them with the intention of a kachim. Well, maybe we should say leiratzu. It should be okay. It should be acceptable. Ma'aseyim mochichim aleim de kachim kalim ninhu. Doesn't our actions show that it's actually kachim kalim to eat kachim, but savon have avid leho. You would have had to do the slaughtering in the north. No, amrei kachim ninhu ume avad lehu de avad shveshachad lehu bedarim. Nah, people will think. And of course, we're going to ask the obvious question on this answer, but people will just think, no, the person didn't do the right thing with the wrong intention. He did the wrong thing with the right intention, meaning he was really intending to bring a kachim kalim, and he just did the wrong thing by slaughtering it in the south. And maybe that's what the story. 1 second though, ihachi machvas l'shem marchashes nami. When you, if that were true, that we could say that maybe the person's intentions were correct and the actions were wrong. Well, then when somebody has the intention for a griddle and actually brings it, but then I'm sorry, brought the mincha for the griddle, but then has the intention for the pan. So then that should also we should also say the same thing. Kakamitz lemarcheshes amar. You know, that when we say, people are going to say, the person's performing the kamitza for the sake of the pan, and a hyper marcheshes nadar, and the owner presumably also made the vow for the pan, and now that the person's bringing it in the griddle, it's actually supposed to be a marcheshes mincha. And he just did the wrong thing, and he brought it in the brought it in the griddle. And so as a result, maybe when the person's in the Kohen's intention is correct. Meaning, how do you know which way it is? Because we have two things that don't match. We know one thing. We know what the person intended, what the Kohen intended, and we know what actually happens. Now, we're now talking about going back to what the person who owns it was really thinking. And maybe it's consistent with the action, and maybe it's consistent with the intention. And so how do I know that we can say that it's all consistent with the intention, that it's all consistent with the action, that the person's original setting aside of the mincha offering is consistent with the action? Maybe it was consistent with the intention and the action was wrong. So hasam kinami b'marcheshes nadar. Nah, that doesn't work by a mincha offering, because when it comes to offering something, if you swear that you're going to bring it in a pan, kimaiti la b'machavat, and then you bring it in the griddle, makavat havya, it turns into a griddle mincha. Kiditnan, as we are going to learn in several months, at the end, near the end of this masechet, on daf kuf bet amud bet, we're going to see haomer harei alai b'machavat, if somebody swears that they are going to bring a mincha in a griddle, behavi b'marcheshes, and then you bring it in a pan, or b'marcheshes, you swear that you're going to bring it in you're going to bring a mincha in a pan, behavi b'machavas, and you end up bringing it in a griddle. Masha hevi. What you brought is you brought, and it's meaning it's a kosher mincha. V'dei nidro lo yatsa, but you haven't fulfilled your vow. So as a result, that's what makes a mincha unique. The point is that if whatever the person's actions done at the very end, whatever the Kohen's actions are done at the very end with respect to the mincha, that makes it that kind of korban. And so as a result, the intention by definition is not going to be consistent. Nah. But 1 second, the Gemara says, the Dilma Amarzo, maybe it wasn't Hare Alai. It wasn't that I'm committing to bring a mincha offering. I was saying this flour is going to be a mincha offering, because Keditanan, and we know that in the next words of that Mishnah on Kuf Bet Amud Bet, Zola Havi b'machavat. If I say that this flour is going to be brought in a griddle, behavi b'marcheshes, and then you bring it in a pan, or b'marcheshes, or I say I'm going to bring it in a pan, behavi b'machavat, and then ends up being brought in a griddle, harei ze psula, then it's not kosher. So we're back to our question: why are we treating a marcheshes versus machavas situation differently from the situation of a kodshim kalim that is a kodshim kodshim, excuse me, kodshe kodshim that is slaughtered in the south with the intention of kodshim kalim, because maybe it really is I apologize. I said that wrong. That if you have kochim kalim that you slaughter in the south for the intention of kodshe kodshim, we should treat that just like we're treating the marcheshes and the machavas. That the intention is completely undermined by your action, because kodshim are not supposed to be slaughtered in the south. They have to be slaughtered in the north. So the fact that you slaughtered it in the south shows that it's really kodshim kalim. Just like when you put it in the marcheshes, it shows that you intended for the marcheshes. And when you put it in the machvas, it shows that you intended for the machvas. So why, when it comes to the mincha offering, does Rabbi Shimon say that it's kosher and it fulfills the person's obligation, whereas when it comes to the kodshim kalim that are now slaughtered with the intention of kodshe kodshim, does it not fulfill the owner's intention?
Because aren't they
fulfill the
two
owner's
different?
obligation?
Aren't they two different ideas, concepts? If we're dealing with kodshim kalim versus kodshim, those are two different animals. What shlamim versus a chatat, so forth, or a korban,
Yep.
but here with the mint, it's still the same flour. Whether you
Well,
put it in this pan or that pan, it's still a flour.
that I
The
hear you,
animal,
but
it's not a
those are
different
two.
animal.
We haven't really gotten into the details, but it's clear that it's two completely separate kinds of offerings. That the
Right.
machavas offering and the marcheshes offerings are different offerings. So the Gemara does not go in that direction, but rather the Gemara says l'Rabbanan hachinami. Actually, you know what? You are completely right. That according to the rabbis, when it comes to the declarations, it's not necessarily clearly false. But Rabbi Shimon, Kavan de Amar Rabbi Shimon, but we're talking about Rabbi Shimon. And Kavan de Amar Rabbi Shimon, Af Yedei Nidro Yatza. Again, with the Mishnah, again on Kuf Bet Amud Bet, not only have you fulfilled the obligation when you not only have you is the korban a valid korban when you brought it when based on the level that you brought it in, but actually you fulfilled your obligation. So even if you so again here you say that you're going to bring it as a marcheshes, and you bring it in the end and you put it in a machvas. So even though you put it in the wrong thing, according to Rabbi Shimon, you have fulfilled your obligation, because the owner's original designation of a particular vessel is effectively not binding. And it's so as a result, when you say it doesn't make a difference whether the person says that this flour is going to be in a marcheshes or that I'm going to be obligated in a marcheshes. It doesn't matter. It works whatever you put it in, and it's going to be valid. And so,
What's
as
the
a res-
obligation that he fulfilled? That he brought a mincha?
yes, the obligation that either he said that I'm going to bring a mincha or that this flour is going to be a mincha. He will have fulfilled that obligation and therefore will not have to bring another korban.
The
And so,
obligation is the mincha. It doesn't matter how he brings it.
well, he may have said mincha that I'm bringing this as a mincha marcheshes,
Uh-huh.
and even though it was put in a machvas, it's going to be good, and it's going to fulfill his obligation.
But if he said nothing, certainly he would fulfill
Well,
the
certainly, of
obligation.
course, if he said nothing, then there's no debate. Everybody would agree that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the point is that actually, unlike the case of Kodshe Kodshim and Kodshim Kalim, where it is possible for it to be a the that when it's possible for his actions to be consistent with with Kodshe Kodshim, and therefore we have to be worried that his words actually are meaningful when it comes to the mincha offering, because the mincha is going to be valid as and fulfill the person's obligation, maybe for the reasons that you highlighted. It's after all, it's a mincha offering. It'll work no matter what. So it doesn't make a difference whether you change from marcheshes to machvas. But when it comes to kachim kalim and kachim kachim, it does make a difference, and therefore it could be the opposite order. It could be that you're not telling such a big falsehood when you think kachim, because maybe you just slaughtered it in the wrong place, because it could still be kachim, because it keeps the name of kachim, even if you slaughter it in the wrong place. Whereas when it comes to the mincha of the machvas and the marcheshes, if you put it in the other item, in the other kind of vessel, it becomes the other kind of korban. That doesn't happen with the respect to kachim kalim and kachim. And so as a result, we can reject this question and say that that's not going to be a problem for Rabba's explanation of Rabbi Shimon. Okay, so sixth question. Elamei ata ola sheshachat l'shem chatas teratza. Okay, but
So
what
then it would
happens?
be acceptable, right? According to Reb Shimon, wouldn't matter what pan he puts it in, but we
Right,
would
the,
matter.
the mincha is acceptable, but the question that we were asking is, what about kachim kalim
Right.
that are slaughtered in the south? And the answer is those are not going to be acceptable. It's not going to be a valid korban to fulfill the person's only obligation. It will be, as we saw in Zvachim, according to the Chachamim, it's a kosher. If you again, it's not a Pesach, assuming it's not a Pesach on
Right.
Pesach, and it's not a chatas. So as a result, it's a kosher sacrifice. It's just not kosher to fulfill the owner's obligation. So elameata ola sheshachat l'shem chatas teratza. What if you slaughter an ola, but you have the intention of a chatas? The high zachar, v'hai nekeva. One is male, one's female. So as a result, you're right. An ola is male, a chatas is female. So doesn't that the gender of the animal show which your korban you're bringing, and therefore undermine any kind of intention? No. Came into Ikasir Nasi. There's a Nasi's goat, the Zacharhu, that's male, and it's a Chatas. So lo Yediyah, you can't tell what kind of korban it is, and therefore it could be that it's not obviously false. So Amr L'Shem Chatas Yachid Umay Ikalamemer. Well, what if the person says that he's offering it for a private Chatas, and then it has, and that's what the Kohen says is his intention, and so as a result, a private Chatas cannot be male, and so Visu, and moreover, what if you flip it Chatas Yachid Shishchata L'Shem Ola Teratza, or you slaughter a private Chatas, and you say that and the Kohen says that he's thinking about an Ola. The Chazas Nekeva, Ola Zachar. Again, a Chatas is female and an Ola is male. So, Mekasya Ba'alya. Nah, the tail covers it. Well, fine, the tail covers the genitals for some of the animals. That works if you're bringing a keves elam, but if you bring a goat that doesn't have a tail that is going to cover the genitals, what are you going to say? So Ella bein scharim lunakevus lava tayu de inchi. People don't pay attention to the genitals of the animals, and so as a result, they're not going to know whether a particular animal is male or female, and therefore it's not going to be so obviously false what you say. All right, fine. Pesach shechkato
So he's
l'shem
saying it's not
asham.
ma'akev then?
No,
So
it's not that
then
it's matman akiv. The point is it so false that we could reject the intention? That's what Rabbah said. Rabbi Shimon is saying. So the point is it's not so false as that we could reject it, because people just don't pay attention. So it's not so obviously false that it requires that we can overcome what the person's intention is and say that the actions eliminate the bad intentions. So Pesach sheshchata l'shem asham l'ratze. What about a Pesach that you slaughter for an asham? D'hai ben shana v'hai ben shtatayim. One is in the first year and one is in the second year. So Kavan de Ika Asham Nazir Asham and so on. That still doesn't work, because maybe the Asham is an Asham Nazir or an Asham Mitzora where it's 1 year old, where it's within the first year. Lo Psikale. So as a result, you can't be sure that the statement is false. So fine. Amar Lishum Gzelos Lishum Asham Ilos. So you say explicitly that you're bringing one of the other kinds of Ashamot. Or Ma'ikal Amemer. Vesu, Asham Gzelos v'Asham Ilos, Shishchatan L'Shum Pesach Leratzu. So, or what if you do an Asham and you slaughter it as a Pesach? The Pesach ben Shana v'Hani ben Shtay Shtanim. The one is 1 year old, and those are in the second year. So as a result, one's in the first year, Pesach's in the first year, and those are in the second year. If you slaughter an asham for theft or an asham for meila, so Ella ben Shana ben Shtay Shanim lava daitayut idinchi. People don't recognize animals whether they're 1 year old or in their first year or in the second year. Ika ben Shana demachzik ben Shtayim, ve'ika ben Shtayim demachzik ben Shana. There are young-looking and old-looking animals. So that doesn't work either. So seir sheshchata l'shum asham liratzi. So 1 second, what about a seir, a goat that you slaughter for an asham? That should work because an asham is not a goat. An asham is a sheep, and a sheep is very different. The hide semer, and a sheep has wool. The high seyar, and a goat is covered with hair. So no, Amri Dikra Ukmahu. People could think that it's a black ram. And Rashi explains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up. Amri Dikra Ukma hu Sabri Ayil Shachar. They'll think that it's a black ram. Ulahaki Nakat Ukma. And here's why they said black. Tistam Seirim Shchorim Hein. Because most of the goats are black. And so as a result, maybe it's not actually, even though you brought a goat, people will think, oh, it's a ram and it's still kosher. And therefore it could be, in fact, a valid korban, it could be an asham. And therefore maybe the intention is correct. And therefore it's not an obviously wrong intention. So final question number 9. Well, what if you slaughter a calf or a bull? A calf or a bull cannot be a Pesach, and it cannot be an Asham. And they're pretty obviously not a baby goat or a sheep. And so as a result, the egel ufar bepesach v'asham leika. You don't allow a calf or a bull for a Pesach or an Asham. So Ein hachinami. You know what? You did successfully come up with an example. So 1 second, what about, and so as a result, and Rabbah says, you know what? Rabbi Shimon would say, if you did one of these things, it would not only be a valid korban, but it would be a valid korban, and it would fulfill the owner's obligation. So what about when he says the fact that the zvachim are different? Umay zvachim. What did he mean that menachos are not like zvachim? Ro zvachim. He means that menachos are not like most animal sacrifices. And so as a result, Rabbah's defense or explanation of Rabbi Shimon is works. And we've tried 9 times to challenge it, and he's came up with a solution every time. But now we go to Rabbah's explanation. And again, the question is, in one place, Rabbi Shimon says that not only does the wrong intention result in an animal sacrifice that is acceptable, but it actually even fulfills the owner's obligation. So lo kasha. Ha kan becomes mincha l'shum mincha. When you're thinking between one mincha and another mincha, and that's your intention, well, that's going to work. And so therefore, that's the korban when we say that it's going to fulfill the owner's obligation even. It's going to be a valid korban and it's going to fulfill the owner's obligation. But when we say that it's going to be valid but not fulfill the owner's obligation, kan bekomes mincha l'shum zebach. If you were to think to yourself that if the Kohen were to think to himself, oh, I'm bringing this kometz as an olah, or as a shlamim, or as any other animal sacrifice, it's going to still be a valid mincha, but it will not fulfill the owner's obligation. So mincha l'shum mincha, when you have one mincha for another mincha, v'zos Torah sa mincha. The pasuk itself tells us why. Really, it shouldn't work. But the Torah specifically has a pasuk, v'zos Torah sa mincha, Torah achas l'chol hamenachos. That basically, whatever intention you have, whether you have a mincha, intention for this mincha or intention for that mincha, the fact that it says zos Torah achas, this is the idea that Kenan was saying earlier, it works. It's all one mincha offering. Mincha l'shum zevach. But if you think about a mincha If you're bringing a mincha and the intention was a zebach, an animal sacrifice, that doesn't work because v'zos Torahs hamincha v'zebach lo ksiv. The Torah doesn't say mincha and zebach. You can't go across the two. So v'ha tana mipnei shema'aseh muchichin aleha kamar. But one second, it doesn't fit so well in the words of Rabbi Shimon because Rabbi Shimon said something about the nature of your actions somehow demonstrate what's going on. Now, with Rabbah, it was clear the nature of the action demonstrated the falsehood of your intention, and therefore we could ignore your intention. But what is it meaning here? So, Haki Kamar, here's the point. Even though this intention is actually going to be inconsistent with the eventual action, that because it's going to go in a different kind of pan, and it's going to go in the pan instead of the griddle or vice versa, the tzipasel, and therefore your intention should result, you would think, in it being invalidated. V'zos Torah mincha, because it says those Torah mincha, Torah chas l'kol menachos. You have one rule for all the minchas, and therefore it's going to be valid. Umay abal bezvachim enukain. And what do we mean by when it says, but that's not true for animal sacrifices? You might have thought, hey, we should say the same principle because there is an aspect of all animal sacrifices that is common. And that is that they're all slaughtered in the same way. And so maybe I would think that we should apply a similar principle across zvachim and say that if you have one in mind and you bring a different kind, it should work. No, it doesn't work because v'zos Torahs mincha v'zebach lo ksiv. It doesn't actually say Torahs mincha v'zebach. It only says Torahs mincha. So you can't go from mincha to zebach. Elami'ata chatas chaylev shishchata l'shem chatas dam l'shum chatas avodas kochavim l'shum chatas nazir l'shum chatas mitzorah l'tehek sheru turatze the amar rachmana v'zos toras hachatas Torah achas l'chol chataos. Well, one second. If zos toras hamincha means that whatever intention across the mincha offerings, it's all going to work. Why not say the same thing with a chatas? All across the chatas it should work because we have the same language of zos toras hachatas. So, l'Rabbi Shimon hachinami. You know what? It does work according to Rabbi Shimon, and it's l'Rabbanan. And even according to the rabbis, ha'amar Rava would tell you chatas chaylev sheshchata l'shem chatas dam. If somebody were to eat chaylev and now have to accidentally or not realizing that it was prohibited, and now he, instead of bringing a chatas for that chaylev, brings a chatas as if he ate blood, l'shum chatas avodas kochavim, or instead he thought that he was bringing it as a chatas for idolatry, kshera, it works, and actually it fulfills his obligation to bring the chatas for the chalev. And so as a result, even according to the rabbis. However, l'shem chatas nazir, l'shem chatas mitzorah, psula. But if your intention is for the nazir or the mitzorah, that doesn't work. Dahani olos b'hadayuninu, because those sacrifices are brought together with olot sacrifices, and therefore it is obvious that you didn't, it's not part of the zos toras hachatas because there are other sacrifices that are associated with it. So Rav Acha braid the Rava masnile l'kule psula, but Rav Acha, the son of Rava, disagreed with his father and said, you know what? Even the rabbis would say all of these cases are puzzle. The shachat osal chatas, and it's all because of the language of he slaughtered it as a chatas, l'shem oto chatas. In order for a chatas to be kosher, according to the rabbis, it needs to be slaughtered for the right chatas. Whereas, again, according to Rava's explanation, if you slaughter a chatas for a different kind of chatas, it's all going to work according to Rabbi Shimon. All right, so that's answer number 2 to the inconsistency within Rabbi Shimon. And answer number three is Rav Ashi. Again, the inconsistency is Rabbi Shimon in one place says just like in our Mishnah, where it says that if you offer one mincha for a different kind, it's going to be kosher if you kosher but not fulfill the obligation. And in another place it says if you offer it a mincha for a different thing, it's going to be not only kosher but it's going to fulfill your obligation. So Rav Ashi Amar Lo Kasha. It's not difficult. Kan bekomitz machavas l'shum marcheshes. Here, when it's kosher, fully kosher, and it's going to even fulfill your obligation, it's when you bring and when you do that, when the Kohen does the kamitza, when it's supposed to go in a griddle, and he says pan, marcheshes. He says pan. Now he doesn't say that this is being done leminchas marcheshes. He just says, I'm going to put it in a pan. He's just thinking to himself the instrument, the vessel, but he doesn't think about the whole nature of the korban. But when is it that it's going to be kosher but not fulfill the person's obligation? Like in our Mishnah, that is where the person says, where the Kohen, when he's doing the kamitza, he's thinking to himself, if this is not a minchas machavas, this is a minchas marcheshes. So when he thinks that it's a minchas marcheshes, so then it's going to be changing the nature of the mincha offering, and then it's going to be valid as a sacrifice, but not fulfill the owner's obligation. So machavas l'shum marcheshes, when you think the wrong utensil, when you think a griddle instead of a pan, he's thinking just about the vessel. He's not thinking about the nature of the korban. And just thinking about the vessel, that's not going to make the korban invalidated for the owner. But if you think about a different sacrifice, if you think a mincha marcheshes instead of a mincha machvas, so then b'mincha depasla machashava kamachashiv. Then you're thinking about the wrong korban, and that's going to cause it to be invalidated. Meaning it's kosher as a sacrifice, but it's not going to fulfill the owner's obligation. But 1 second, we said the whole reasoning of Rabbi Shimon had to do with the nature of the person's action, and somehow their action was what was showing us what the person's intention. No, Hachikamar. Here's what he means. Even though you can't tell based on the person's intention what the actual supposed to be was, tipasel, and therefore maybe you should make it invalidated. But instead, because you actually put it in the right utensil, it's going to be kosher and fully okay. Umay aval b'zvachim ein okay. So what does it mean when they say, but when it comes to zvachim, that's not true? So afal gav teshchita achas l'kulan, that even though there's one slaughtering for everything, even though there's one slaughtering for all different kinds of animals, they all have the same shchita, zrika achas l'kulan, and maybe there's one kind of sprinkling for all of them. Of course, that's not really true, but there's, all you need is one application to fulfill most of the obligations associated with them. Kabbalah achas l'kulan, and the receiving of the blood is done in a similar fashion. Bizvicha de pasla be machshava kamachashiv, when you intend the wrong kind of sacrifice, that's going to be an intention that is going to cause it to be invalidated. So Amrle Rav Acha Brei the Rav Rav Ashi Chareva Mishum Belula. But 1 second, Rabbi Shimon also said that a dry mincha, when you have the intention of a mincha that was mixed with oil, that also would be kosher. But dry and mixed are clearly talking about the sacrifice the type. That's not talking about just a vessel. So Amai Amar Rabbi Shimon. Why does Rabbi Shimon say even in those cases that the mincha is not only kosher, but it's going to fulfill the owner's obligation? So Amar Le L'Shum Bila Ba'alma. He doesn't mean that the intention is to take the flour and to do it and to mix it with oil as a sacrifice and that he's intending to bring a different sacrifice. No, the point is that he takes the or it takes the flour and he's thinking to himself, "Oh, this is flour that would be good to mix." Not mix for a korban, but just in general. So it's not about, as Rashi says, l'shem bila ba'alma, second line of the medium wide lines at the bottom of Rashi on Gimel Amibet. L'shem bila ba'alma, kevan dolo idkar bahaja minchas chareva, l'shem minchas belula, because he didn't specifically have in mind, again, the word mincha associated. Divrei ruach ba'alma ninhu. What he said is just air in the wind. It's just blowing in the wind. Kamanda Amar Hareini Kometz L'Shem Davar Acher. It's like the person said, "I'm taking this kometz for some third party that has nothing to do with karbanot." If you have in mind something that has nothing to do with karbanot, you're okay. It's not, that's not going to cause everything to be puzzled. And so that all works. And so as a result, that's the situation. And so, Ihachi though, back into the Gemara, L'shum shlamim nami. Why don't we say the same thing? If a person brings an ola and he has in mind a shlamim, let's say that it's still an ola and it should fulfill the owner's obligation. L'shum shlamim ba'alma. He's just trying to create peace in the world. As Rashi tells us, Ihachi bezvachim. Next Rashi, Demoda Rabbi Shimon, Delo Alu, where Rabbi Shimon agrees that when it comes to an Ola that you have in mind for a Shlamim, everybody agrees that that's not going to fulfill the owner's obligation. Amai Moda, why though does he agree? Ki Shachid Ola L'Shem Shlamim, when a person slaughters an Ola with the intention of a Shlamim, Talel L'Shem Chova, let it fulfill the person's obligation. Tahachim Kamer, maybe what the Kohen means when he's saying Shlamim, he means Chova Zu Ani Shochet. I am slaughtering this obligatory offering. L'shem la'asot shalom bein koni ubeini. I'm trying to create peace between my maker and me. And so as a result, maybe that's the story. Gemara responds, Hachi hashta, give me a break. That's not comparable at all. Hasam zeva kufa ikri shlamim. There is a sacrifice that's called a shlamim. You can't change the meaning of the word. But a diksiv hamakriv es dam hashlamim. You bring the blood of a shlamim. Hazorik is dam hashlamim. You throw the blood of the shlamim. But hacha mincha gufa mi ikri belula. But is there any mincha that is called belula? No. The mincha that's written, it says belula b'shemen. It's mixed with oil. Belula b'shemen ikri. Belula stama lo ikri. So it's called mixed with oil, not mixed. And so as a result, the word mixed doesn't have any meaning, separate. And so as a result, if the intention is mixed only and not mincha belula and not a mixed mincha or belula b'shemen and not something that is could be the name of the korban, well, then you're not actually changing the underlying intention. Your words are meaningless. So hula karaba lo amri, everybody. So why don't everybody agree with each other? So let's go through it. Hula karaba lo amri. They don't agree with Rabba Rabba machshava bin minkara pasal rachmana, because according to Rabba, you would think that something that is obviously false, the Torah should say is invalidated. And yet, Rabba is telling us that it's kosher. And Karava lo Amri, they don't want to say like Rabba, because the Zos Torahs lo mashlahu. He bases it based on Torah, Zos Torahs hamincha, and that isn't the implication of the Zos Torahs, that there's one law irrespective of which mincha you have in mind. And Rav Ashi lo Amri, and people don't like Rav Ashi because Mishum Kushid the Rav Acha B'rei the Rabba, because of the question that Rav Acha asked about the Belula. The Belula answer seems a little forced. So Milsa the Pshita le the Rabba lahai gisa le Rabba lahai gisa mibai le Rav Hoshia. What was obvious to Rabba and to Rabba in each direction was a question for Rav Hoshia. To buy Rav Hoshia asked the Amri La buy Mine Rav Hoshia mi Rebbe Asi, and some people say that Rav Hoshia asked this question of Rav Asi. Mincha l'shum zevach. If you have a mincha and you intend, and the Kohen, when he takes it and he does the kamitza, he has the intention that this kamitza is for an ola or shlamim or some any kind of sacrifice of a large animal. Miley Amar Rabbi Shimon. What would Rabbi Shimon say? So, time of the Rabbi Shimon Nushum Machshava Deminka Rolo Pasla is his thinking the way Rabbah says that it's because of how obvious it is, and so therefore it's not going to be puzzle. Machshava Deminka Rahu, and this is obviously false because a mincha is not an animal sacrifice. Oh, and therefore it should be kosher. Oh, Dilma, no. Time of the Rabbi Shimon Mishum Duksiv Bezos Torasa Mincha. Or maybe the reasoning is based on Rabbah's reasoning of Zos Torasa Mincha. V'zevach lo ksiv, and it doesn't say zevach, and therefore it won't be kosher. So Amar Le, Rabbi Asi said back to Rabbi Hoshia, Klum higanu l'sof daito shel Rabbi Shimon. We've come to the end of Rabbi Shimon's thinking, meaning we don't know. So why didn't Rav Asi answer like any of the three answers? Exactly as we said before. Karabba lo mashani le. He doesn't answer like Rabba mishum kushya da Abaye because of Abaye's question that we saw yesterday. Kirava lo mashani le, and he didn't answer like Rabba mishum kushas zos toras chatas because of the question of zos toras chatas, meaning the same rule should apply by chatas, and we know that it doesn't. And Rav Ashi lo mashani le, and he doesn't answer like Rav Ashi mishum kushya de Rav Acha braid de Rava because of the question of Rav Acha, the son of Rava. And so, bottom line is that we have these three answers. None of them are perfect. And so as a result, Rav Hoshia wonders which one is it and doesn't give an answer at all. And so the Gemara now returns to our Mishnah and considers the mincha offerings of a sinner and a sota to understand why they are completely invalid if offered with the wrong intention. But for that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf.
But didn't we have an answer at the end of the Amud Aleph, where that we said
We
that
did answer Abaye's question. The point is that we don't that clearly Rav Asi didn't like that answer.
no, by Reb Shimon, wasn't it? Reb Shimon.
Yeah,
That
we answered Rabbi Shimon's question. We answered the question. The point is that nobody likes any of the answers. All right, we got to go. Have a great day, everybody.
I thought they liked that answer.
The point is that
The Ego Bafar,
Rav
Shachtim,
Asi doesn't like
Tessa.
the answer. Rav Asi doesn't like the answer. All right, have a great day.